Bueno, muy buenos días
So
a
good
todos.
morning to everyone. You're most welcome to this first session of this practice community. We want to thank you for accepting this invitation. It is a special invitation for the representatives of the KIX member countries and also experts, both men and women, in the educational field here in the region. We want to thank you for the support of our co-workers of OX, GPE, and O6. I see some of them saying, thank you, Florencio, for being here. First of all, I want to remind you that please choose the interpretation channel of your preference. It could be English, Spanish, or French. Please write down there in the chat your name, your institution, and the country you are representing so we can know who you are. Please also verify the proper working of your microphone and your camera so you can actively participate. It is important to say that this community it is going to be, or this session is going to be recorded, so we can check it later, and also for us to share the content. It is also important to understand that this practice community, it is a collective work that we want to do with you. It is a co-construction of the content, of the reflection and thoughts about the perspective of gender equality in education, which is so important in Latin America and the Caribbean. We all know that, right? So this space is going to last 1 hour. And we have three key moments. The first one, it is a presentation of what a community is, practice community is. The second moment, it is when we're going to put into context, we will also talk about and we'll present the concept framework of the community in general terms. And it will be a space where we're going to be able to share experiences. And the third moment, it is going to be a feedback of this meeting. So this time, and within these 5 sessions that we have set, we're going to have three facilitators. I will start. I am Maciel Morales. I am a researcher of the KIX Club. I am a doctor in education. My interest topics were related to art and education, but for many years, gender, it is something which is cross-sectional all over the place in education, the world, and politics. So I am really happy to be with you all. With us, we also have Fernanda del Pozo. Fernanda, would you like to introduce yourself, please? Good morning, and thank you very much for being here. I am Fernanda del Pozo. I am also a researcher of KIX LAC. I have worked in many different education, intercultural education topics, safeguarding public education. And gender is also a topic which is I am really interested in, especially the perspective and the strengthening of the public perspective with a gender perspective. I want to introduce our third panelist, facilitator, Jenny Rivas. Jenny, can you introduce yourself, please? I am really happy to be here with you all. I am part of this team, KIX Lab, here in the country. I'm a manager of gender and the Minister of Education. I worked there I've been working in this field for 24 years. It's really important for me to have this practice community because we're going to build collectively many different things we're going to learn. We're going to learn from experiences of all of the people who are part of this community. So you're most welcome. Thank you very much, Jenny and Fernanda. We're really happy to have this space of reflection, thought, and as Jenny well said, of co-construction, because that is the main goal. We should all participate. The main goals of this first session are going to be introduce the practice community and also talk about the framework, concept framework. So to do so, since we have limited time, I will give the floor to Fernanda. She's going to be in charge of the first part. Thank you very much, Marcial. So first of all, you received an invitation, and I just want to remind you of the main goal of co-build or to build this practice community. We want to have a space so we can share experiences and also analyze the knowledge related to gender equality in public education. Why do we want to practice or practical education community? It is interesting to have this type of community because practice communities are related to doing things. So it is a group of people who are sharing a common interest for something that they are doing. and they get together and they interact in order to learn on how to do it better. So this perspective, I mean, here learning, it is a process which is coming from social activities, and we're therefore co-building. So therefore, if we want to talk about gender in education in Latin America, it is good to know how we all see it in our own countries and the experience that we have and that we also have in relation to gender. So what activities are involved in this community? First of all, we want to create and provoke and have a conversation about what gender is, of which are the prosthetic gender in the education. We also want to share experiences of policies, initiatives, or programs which are implemented in the region from the perspective of gender equality, and do analysis of the different cases, analyzing these experiences amongst ourselves in a trust, safe environment, secure environment. And finally, give me just 1 second. And finally, we expect, I mean, from this work, from this instance and initiative, we want to create two products or byproducts, which are going to be done collectively. First of all, it is a written document, which could be a policy brief or a kind of written work, piece of work. And second of all, a webinar or workshop. Those are our main goals. And this should come from these 5 sessions of work that we're going to have. And also, since we're going to have 5 sessions, we want to invite experts in this field who are going to give some guidelines on this debate. So let's go to our next slide, please. We're going to have 5 sessions. Here are the dates for each of them. We are foreseeing once a month up until January, and afterwards, at the end of January, February, there will be a conference prepared by KIX, an annual meeting, and we expect that in that space, we can also share the results of this community. Let's continue. Since this is a practice community, a new space that we're creating, we decided to have some protocols which are clear for everyone. So this is a collective work, participative work, as we have said. We'd like to have some commitment from a participation from you all. That is to say, having 1 session a month, we're going to have 5 sessions, and we'll try to be the same participants in most of the sessions. Also, we're going to grant, if you wish to, a certificate of participation for all of the people who have attended at least 4 of the 5 sessions. We have also thought of having a drive where we can share material, upload material, literature, different articles, newspaper articles, everything that it might relate for our topic. And also sharing our contacts, because what we want to do in this community, it is to interact amongst ourselves. And from the local viewpoints of each reality in different territories, we should have a regional viewpoint related to gender equality. Ideally, we want cameras to be on during the sessions because we'd like to get to know you. We'd like this to be in person, but we still want to know your faces. We want to know your opinions. And therefore, the participation ways, ideally, when we open the floor, please take the floor. Tell us your experiences, give your opinions. Another way of participating, it is by writing things, questions there in the chat box. So that's a protocol. Once again, you're most welcome. Thank you. So to start, this is the first session, and we have prepared a brief presentations in order to organize a framework, concept framework, from where we're going to move on when we talk about gender. So this framework, it is open for debate, of course. This is a presentation, and afterwards we're going to open the debate so we can talk about this viewpoint or perspective. So What is gender? That's the first question. Following the definition of the WHO, gender are the roles, characteristics, and opportunities defined by society, which are considered appropriate for men, women, children, boys and girls, and people with no binary identities. This comprehension of gender as a social construction has roots in its first half of the 20th century, when from social sciences, they started to problematize the relationship between sex and the roles assigned for men and women. One of the pioneer works was the anthropology of modern myth that in the 30s said that the gender roles are cultural and not biological, and they may vary widely in different surroundings. And Simone de Beauvoir in the 40s, who studied women historically, and he realized that that was said or mentioned as feminine was something built through social relationships and individual relationships as well. And we have this sentence that you are not born, but you are done. More contemporary discussions about this gender category mention that gender, it is not only limited to the social roles of men and women, but also it has power relationships related to these roles. This is important because gender, it is a constitutive element of social elements based on differences which distinguish sexes, and at the same time create relationships of power which are historical and sociocultural amongst men and women. And there are no binary gender identities. So that is a framework of this power relationship where we build our identities, we interact with others, and we organize our participation in society. So when we talk about violence, inequality in gender, what we're talking about are practices. We're talking about discrimination, segregation, or evidence which is against, from these roles that society has set, which should occupy, that people should occupy according to their biological sex. What's interesting is that this is conveyed through mechanisms of socialization, and they're reproduced on an often basis through these different stereotypes. Oftentimes, we feel that these roles are normal or natural, and that makes inequality or violence against gender, it is invisibilized and it is not visible, really hard to see. Now, how can we connect gender and education? So here we start from the base that in Latin America and the Caribbean violence and sex inequality is expressed in different ways in school and in educational surroundings. It is not away from it. One important reason for that is that schools, since they are a space of socialization, which is fundamental, together with the family, they act as a reproductor of these inequalities. So if we understand that at the school, it is a socialization space, we also understand that school also influences and they also affects the knowledge, decision, construction of identity, and the aspirations for the future of boys, girls, and adolescents who are participating in the educational systems. Talking about this, there's plenty of evidence that has been gathered from these territories related to this inequality of gender, which occurs within the educational systems. For example, in the year 2020, KIX LAC, SUMA, and OX did some research about the educational challenges in the region. Important challenges, which was reduce gender inequality and address the diversity of sexual identity in an inclusive fashion or way. There's also an UNESCO and SUMA research about educational inclusion in the region, and there are different fields where inequalities of gender are reproduced in the educational system. For example, there is inequality to access, discrimination due to sexual orientation, bias of gender in the curriculum, safety and security problems in the schools, and discrimination of teachers towards boys, girls, and sexual dissidents. We understand that the gender approach, it is analysis which address these power influences. And it allows to understand this relationship in a geographical context, which is cultural, ethnical, historical as well. And it also allows us to acknowledge that boys and girls have the same potential of learning and development and the same possibilities to enjoy those goods, values, which are valued socially, and opportunities and available resources, no matter the differences, biological differences and gender identity. Therefore, from gender equality, we acknowledge equality of rights. Finally, why do we adopt and we have this public education last name? We consider, we believe, not only us, but This is an agreement which is quite wide, that education, it is a human right, and at the same time, it is a public asset because it safeguards the interest, collective interest of society. So if we consider that equality of gender equality, it is in the interest of our society, we need to think that it is necessary to address it and boost it from the public educational systems. So that's our framework where we want to start from about perspective of gender equality in the educational systems. Thank you very much, Fernanda. Can we go to our next slide? This is the concept framework that we want to work on. We will also work in different dimensions within this thematic or topic. We have also thought about working in curriculum and school material, everything related to textbooks, resources, didactical and pedagogical resources. Another dimension, we have thought it is teachers, training practices and pedagogical speeches, everything related to teachers practice, right? And also working over the school relationships. If there are some other additional dimensions which you think are important, please let us know. We're open and they're going to be welcome. We have thought in these 3 dimensions, but of course, there might be more. And we'd like to listen to you because we're going to open the space for discussion. So before that, I'd like to tell you that we have decided to include some institutions, allies, who are working with this gender equality perspective. In our next slide, if I'm not wrong. So to do so, we have named 3 institutions. World Alliance for Education, AME. This institution, within their purposes, they are saying that all of boys and girls must receive an education. They must be healthy, of course. There shouldn't be gender bias, and to do so, they have taken some initiatives which are fundamental, such as the inclusion of gender equality in everything related and all of the activities done by the World Alliance, intervening and working for gender equality, having gender equality at the very core of the educational systems and also at the core of the debate, sharing knowledge and innovation, addressing gender obedience related to school, and once again, having gender equality and education at the world scenario. Those are the words of Jenny. We need to see this through the lenses of gender equality, and therefore this is going to be cross-sectional in all of different scenarios. Another institution which we're really happy to be part or that is working with us, it is International This is gender transformation activities. It promotes entrepreneurship of women, which also includes making decisions and controlling resources. This type of project somehow unmasks the different inequalities on both men and women, different genders, non-binary genders, which are also important, commit themselves to work on this topic from a socioeconomic level, political level, in order to change the different regulations which allowed for inequalities to happen. We were talking about the IDRC and SUMA, of course, the Laboratory for Innovation for Latin America and the Caribbean. And we have different activities in order to visualize and work these topics, because we know that in Latin America and the Caribbean, there are different difficulties and barriers for girls and young boys. There's inequality for the formal education. Standardized results as PISA are quite different, with low results in mathematics for girls. At the structural level, for instance, 43% of ministries of education have created policies related to gender. So this shows and ratifies the need of advancing in these topics in Latin America and the Caribbean. And it is fundamental to acknowledge the disadvantages, educational disadvantages, which are getting bigger related to gender. And we should also include some other topics and other factors related to it, such as socioeconomic, ethnic, or sexual orientation, and so on, just to name some, right? And finally, UNESCO, which for many years has also talked about this topic. And in a text which is reimagined together, our future, they say that gender equality should be addressed in all of the different curricula. We need to work on the curriculum, right? It should be work in this curriculum, and stereotypes should be eliminated. Gender stereotypes should be eliminated. Both boys and girls should also learn about it. And facilitators, teachers, and educators should also have the tools in order to face the different gender discrimination and racism problems in all of their different dimensions. So this is our framework of the first session. And what we'd like to do, it is open the conversation, open the floor. And to do so, I will give the floor to Jenny Rivas. Thank you, Fernanda. Thank you very much, Marcel, for this context and for inviting us into this conversation. We're here, but in the end, we're a community, practice community. And therefore, we want to listen to you. We want to see you as well. We also want your comments in the chat box. We'd like to know in which field you can see this gender violence and gender inequality in the educational system in your countries. So we're open. We want to get to know you. We want to know your opinions. All of the opinions are important. So please, who's going to be the first one? Who's going to take the floor first? We want to get to know each other, and this is an important topic. And we're also paying attention to the chat box. So in which fields can we see this gender inequality and violence, inequality in the educational system? That is the question. Marcel mentioned what we're going to work on. We're going to work in the curriculum, right? That is something that we need to address. We think that the curriculum does not or cannot produce inequalities. Well, it happens that that's a reality. So the floor is open for you to take the floor. Please remember that the interesting of this community is that you should start or should share your experience in your territory, knowing in which fields this violence and inequalities are observed. We understand that sometimes it is hard to take the floor. It is hard to break the ice. So maybe, Jenny, what can you tell us from El Salvador? You've been gender manager there in El Salvador. What can you tell us? In which fields have you observed these inequalities and violence? Thank you very much. I'd like to share that oftentimes inequalities and violence related to gender, we cannot see them, we naturalize them, we think that they are not violence or gender violence activities. Talking about the relationships, talking about the day-to-day relations there at school, we observe and we see gender violence when we assign different tasks or works in the educational system. In our public schools, the topic of the cleaning, it is shared. I mean, boys and girls should do it, right? But oftentimes, teachers who order that task are usually girls. We also have this topic related to, you mentioned something that really got my attention, the PISA results and mathematics results. We think that in our hidden curriculum that girls, adolescents, are not good for math. That's what we think. So in that contraction, in what we think, we're not promoting girls and adolescents to, we don't really invite them to participate in mathematics. There is gender balance when a girl who is pregnant, we have a high rate of girls and adolescent pregnancy. So there is a balance, which is, I mean, it is regulated that no girl who is pregnant can be expelled from a school. Sometimes violence, it is not seen or perceived, but we expel them from the educational system. We also have inequality when we choose careers, tertiary education subjects, and There's inequality also in toys in preschool. Sometimes we give girls, those toys with this social construction. Socially, we have been taught for us to play and to have the roles of taking care of cooking or house chores, which is not bad. It is not bad, but I mean, we are starting with this education topic, and of course, they should build their own experiences. But boys, they receive cars, they receive building toys, but oftentimes these toys for boys and girls are quite different. Girls have toys for cooking, for taking care of others, and when they grow up, their imaginary or their thoughts, they cannot drive a car. They think they cannot drive or a truck. So from that moment, we're starting or building inequality. So oftentimes this inequality, we do not see it or we don't see them because from the curriculum, they are telling us, if we're talking about curriculum, since there are different areas which we're going to deal with and which we're going to talk about as a community, learning community, the curriculum, it is a curriculum which may help us or which may also reinforce the stereotypes of gender that we have and which are related to violence. Oftentimes in this curriculum, there are women scientists, there are men who are scientists, there are mathematicians who are men, and men are fighting for the independence of a country, for instance, but women are not seen there. And even the language gives us inequality. It creates violence. When we invisibilize women and girls, when we say boys only. So that is also an important topic in the curriculum, an inclusive language. Having an inclusive language. We also have plenty of education, which is quite sexist when we start from the examples that we have just mentioned. Anyone else, or maybe in the chat, we can see some observations related to violence and inequalities. In the future sessions, we have the possibility to introduce our policies, to introduce our projects related to gender. And there we're going to be building all together. I may continue, but El Salvador experience, I imagine it is similar to all of the other countries. This gender topic related to education, it is something that sometimes, we don't really understand it. Sometimes we don't get it. And we think that those are different things, right? But it is a topic related to human rights. Fernanda also mentioned this as something related to rights. And it is like that. We need to have the same rights and equality of conditions to study. Is anyone willing to take the floor? Good morning. I do not have a camera. I am I am Marlene Campo, part of the technical team of gender equality of the educational ministry. I work with Jenny Rivers, and yes, I'm really glad to participate in these experiences in order to learn more. Just to add that gender violence in schools, it also includes harassment, verbal harassment, sexual harassment, abuse, punishments, physical punishment that oftentimes occur in schools, intimidation, and this brings consequences. It creates absency, but desertion, quitting, low self-esteem, even depression, pregnancy, infections, and so on. So within this gender violence framework, which is still occurring in schools and all over the educational system, we come from a side which is patriarchal, where it is hard to eliminate that bias, which is so rooted in ourselves. And teachers in front of students, they also have that capacity of modeling and also creating changes, but at the same time, they also reproduce the same violence in the educational field and in the classroom as such. So therefore, violence amongst equals, it is kept in educational centers or schools. There's no way to solve the different conflicts in a positive manner. There's no information available about the types of violence, the different effects that they may produce in girls and boys. So all of that absenteeism or absence of mechanisms for teachers to deal with it is also important. We need to have them we need to include them in this conversation. That's what I wanted to contribute with. Thank you. Thank you, Marlene. I was on mute. Can you hear me, right? Yes. Thank you. So since we are nearby, I had to turn off my mic. Thank you, Marlene. Gender balance and sexual balance in the educational field, it is a really important, serious problems in all over the world, and Salvador is not an exception. And balance again, boys and girls, it is one type of violence which occurs in different fields where women work and where girls work. It is important to include that. We should also analyze it from the different spaces where we are at. Michelle, the floor is yours. Michelle is muted.
Good morning to everyone. Sorry about that. Michelle Brathwaite from Grenada, the Isle of Spice, where everything is nice. That's what I was saying. Okay, I just thought I just took note of a few things. Being very practical, here in Grenada, we still may have situations where within the classroom, you have rows where they may just be for boys, rows where you may just have girls. Very practical in terms of what is happening on the ground. You may have even in terms of the register, in terms of attendance, where boys are separate from girls. You have in terms of technical and vocational educational training, where more boys are geared towards vocational training, technical and vocational training than girls. So you do have that happening here in Grenada. We look at textbooks. A lot of them you find not only in terms of the illustration, but as was mentioned in terms of authors, and we have great authors and so that are women, but we find most what is dominating is that of authors of men in terms of textbooks. So we do have these situations as well in Grenada. We have the challenge of bullying as well within the classroom. There are children who might be struggling in terms of their sexual orientation, and it is not easy for them within the classroom. We do have educators who might, because of our own religious persuasion and so on, where a particular value system is being promoted more than another. So we do have a lot of the present status quo is something that we have to challenge. We do need advocates who would be in the position who can challenge some of the situations which exist here in Grenada in terms of gender balance, gender equity. So I think a lot of things that are happening internationally, we do have the challenges here in Grenada. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Really good examples, huh? Really good example. That's the way in which we're going to build and think. Anyone else willing to take the floor?
Definitivamente tenemos muchas cosas en común. El tema de las
We have many
desigualdades.
things in common, right? I mean, these gender inequality are so common, not only at school, but also in our daily lives. Our education, I mean, at school, we reinforce education elements in order to unbuild or relearn, in order to have a school free of violence, gender violence, or also to reinforce what we bring from home. So that's why this learning community is so important.
Muchas gracias, Jenny. Yo solo quería recalcar que también lo interesante de
I
esta
just want to
comunidad
emphasize that what's important about this community is that we have
una diversidad
a
de
diversity of territories,
con varios
and we have many different representatives who are member of KIX. We want to thank you all for being here. We have people from different countries, from Nicaragua, from Haiti, from Grenada, El Salvador, and OE countries. So what's interesting, it is to share experiences from all of us. So I invite you, William, for instance, would you like to give an example from Haiti? I invite you because you're working in a nice project where you're also participating. It is fundamental to know this reality of Haiti. People from Nicaragua. So you're all welcome.
Una pregunta en el chat
We have a question in the chat.
De Florencio.
de
Oui,
Florencia, right? Florencio or William? William, let's see.
oui, oui. Je voudrais souhaiter bonjour à tout le monde. Je pourrais souligner que dans le cas d'Haïti, en ville comme à la campagne,
I want to say that in the case of Haiti, in the city and also in the countryside, it seems he's having a connection problem. And the quality of the audio does not allow us to interpret. He's breaking. Yes, unfortunately, there's a connection problem. It happens to us from time to time. Williams, maybe you can write in the chat and we can read what you wanted to tell us. And Florencio, would you like to take the floor to ask a question? Give me just 1 second. Can you hear Florencio? I cannot hear him very well. Florencio, we cannot. Can you hear me now? Absolutely. There we are. Yes, I was moving the camera and well, anyways. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for this invitation. I don't want to get involved too deep into this because this is your debate, your conversation, but I have a question. I have a doubt. In general terms, when we talk about gender perspective, gender studies in education, something which seems to be more important, this is a gender approach which also includes the masculinity perspective, how they're built socially, at school, in their families as well. There are some roles related to what masculinity or what masculine is, what are boys, and how that is also related to this problem that we're talking about. This is not only a gender perspective. This is not only in the empowerment of girls, women, students, but we also need to take charge on how to build the other half of the problem, right? Which is these roles of boys. In our DRC who have worked, in the case of Nicaragua and in the case of El Salvador, there was an interesting study about the construction of masculinity, toxic masculinity, and also about positive deviations, experiences of boys, adults, that though having some conditions, where the most logical thing would have been to, them to have a traditional masculinity which is toxic and chauvinist, but they were able to detour. So there's a thought, a reflection, which is important. How can this take charge of the education of boys beyond the empowerment of girls? And how this is addressed from the education ministries? I understand that. And I agree that this is a debate, a conversation that has to do with feminism, that has to do with the women empowerment. But there's also a second element, which oftentimes it is not included, not mentioned. And I think it is important in relation to how we also take charge of a better education for boys in this case. Thank you, Florencio. From my experience, I mean, I know that we're going to know the experience of different countries here, but we do not see this topic of gender equality. So that's why we work on gender equality, gender perspective from these both levels, right? It is not good if we empower girls and women for life if there's a man who it is not transforming his or the reality. So the Ministry of Education is boosting an education which is not sexist, where masculinity and masculinity is also important. We're not working this from schools only. We're also working them with public workers and with people who work in different departments. Because from school, we need to transform that reality or those realities of that education for them to be part of this change, this Pacific co-living. We want to, we have this sentence saying we should live all in peace. Boys, men, adolescents in the educational system or teachers, they cannot be outside this process. We're not talking, I mean, we're framing this within feminism because we're fighting for human rights for women. I mean, that doesn't mean that we are not, or we're making, invisibilizing human rights of men. We need to build an education which is non-sexist, based on respect and human rights for all of the people. Florencio, or maybe the team, I mean, we're getting into the topic, right? We're getting to know each other. We are addressing the topic and this gender perspective in education, in public education. We want it to be an education which is egalitarian, where everyone feel included, right? Feel part of it. We don't need, I mean, we work as Minister of Education. I'm going to give the floor to Violeta. But masculinity, it is something fundamental as well. Violeta, you were asking the floor. Would you like to take the floor now? Good morning, everyone. Violeta Gago from Nicaragua, National University, Autónoma National University at Nicaragua. This topic, it is really interesting. It is also a topic which in Nicaragua, I mean, we have advanced since we constituted the Ministry of Education for Women in order to set policies set on having best practices of gender equality in the country. From the Education Ministry, we have created a subject which is called Rights and Dignity of Women. So from primary and elementary and secondary and high school, we want to set the role of women, especially in education and in the economic system. Equality of opportunities for boys in primary and secondary school. They're learning and they're also knowing which their rights are, their obligations, and what their roles are. It is important to highlight that from family, I mean, they also need to address those topics because even though this is seen and covered at schools, I mean, if parents are not related with these topics, if they don't know about these topics, I mean, they should be involved. Families and schools and the state, the Ministry of Education, and all of the stakeholders should also be part of this. It is important to highlight that from universities, they're working topics related to gender equality. There are also opportunities in different careers for in order to create the same opportunities for everyone. There were some careers which didn't include topics as geology, renewable energies, engineering. And now we can see at university that both men and women, I mean, they are studying different careers that they didn't study before. It is also important to highlight that from the universities, we're also, both men and women are participating in different competencies, businesses, innovation elements, and they're having a main role in this empowerment leadership. And this is empowering women. They have an active role. And this is also important This is coming from the Ministry of Education, Ministry of Women, Ministry of Economy, the Ministry of Health as well. So in all of these different ministries and in this connection, they can harmonize strategies, general strategies at a country level in order to promote this gender equality. Here at the university, we're having specialists talking about this, specialists talking about this with students, because we all have rights and we all have an important fundamental role in the development, economic development, and improving better mechanisms for the better life quality of people here in Nicaragua, both women and men. So, in this topic, we should have an institutional communication. We should all be involved in the development of this. And from families and from schools, there should be this connection so we can develop the best practices of gender equality. We're going to advance in this topic. We're advancing in this. We're satisfied because we're improving day by day, and more people are joining these gender policies activities. Thank you very much, Violeta. Thank you for your contribution. We need to work at an institutional level, but we also need to work collectively. We are just starting, we're finishing conversation related to, which is going to be fluent, which is going to allow us to get to know Nicaragua, the situation, the situation there in Grenadines as well. So with this nice conversation, I know we need to talk more, but we're going to give the floor to Marcial. Thank you very much, Jenny. I mean, time went by so fast. We have many things prepared, but we need to close this session. This is the first session out of 5 and of many others. This conversation, we know it has different dimensions. In the next sessions, we'd like to have and concentrate more in the territorial viewpoints, in the different dimensions that we have said. We had a question that we wanted to do related to if you knew some initiatives or if you had worked in initiatives related to gender perspective in your countries. But this is something that, I mean, the question is open, right? But we will need to answer it in our next session. I'd like to know if, could you please turn on your cameras? Because we need to have an official photograph of the first session of practice community. So I'd like to thank, please, could you please turn on your cameras for just a second so Caro can take a picture. Thank you very much. Just for a second. And Caro, you please tell me when we're ready with the picture. We're ready with the picture. Thank you. Well then, just to tell you that we'd like to have some feedback, some comments from you in relation to this first session. There are 3 questions which we're going to ask. You can answer by raise of hand, or you can also have your impressions, write your impressions there in the chat box. This will help us to build the second session so it is more participative each time, because we know that we have 2 things we want to create from this community. One of them, it is a document, an article, a text with a content, with territorial viewpoints from all of our experiences. So the first thing that we want to know is that, why do you think it is important to have a space such as this one, practice community for public education, gender equality? What do you think about this methodology we have offered? Fernanda introduced this at the beginning, and in this first session, which was just quite fast, did you learn anything in this first session? And what did you learn? You may raise your hand and you may answer it, but you can also answer in the chat box. No problem with that. Jenny or Fernanda, would you like to contribute with this? Well, this space is quite important because besides learning, we're learning all through our lives. We're cooperating, collaborating, but here we are placing at the very center the importance of education to be for everyone. No one can be left behind. Boys and girls, we have not talked about the different ways of seeing this gender equality within schools. So this methodology, I think it is quite important. We can, of course, improve it. That's why we're here, for you to help us. And we learn something new on a daily basis. We have plenty of coincidences, but we will also have plenty of learnings. Thank you, Jenny. If you are not willing to answer this live, you can also talk about or answer in the chat box. If you want to cover some special topics in our next session, I mean, we want to work from the different territories. And Fernanda is going to comment which are the next steps. Thank you, Maciel. I want to thank you all for participating in this meeting today. Just remind you that we have planned 5 sessions which are going to be once a month on a monthly basis. So we were really interested in knowing what you think about this modality in order to know how we can build our next session in such a way that it is of your interest. So you feel interested in participating, and we want to know how you would like to participate in the sessions also. Once again, remember, this is a community, this is a collective work where we want to get the territorial experience of you all. We're going to bring some people, some experts in this topic in order to tuning up the framework and the viewpoint related to this gender equality. There are many different dimensions to be included. Florencio opened one more, which is also quite interesting. I mean, these masculinities, there's plenty of work being done in Latin America. So it is something that we need to address, we want to address. And in our next session, 2 more things. I don't know if Maciel mentioned, but we're going to open a drive, shared folder, which is going to be for you to upload material, and you can also access material from there. So please feel free to use that space, virtual space. And next session, in our next section, we're going to analyze some policy cases, educational policy cases in the region. To do so, we're going to we sent you a form. So please, if you know any initiative, I mean, please answer the questions in order to know the initiatives you know of in your territories or in the LATAM region and the Caribbean. So please, we're going to have an analysis of some policies, some programs, and also we're going to have some experts who are going to speak about some specific topic about this gender equality perspective in education, public education. So you're invited to continue participating in this space. Invite people you think could be interested. So we're trying to open these networks, and thank you very much. Thank you for being here. I want to thank you all. This is a great opportunity, not only at a personal level, but also at an institutional level, and especially for education. So we invite you all for our next session. So you are part, please join us so we can build together this community. I want to thank you all. Sonia, thank you for your message in the chat. Would like to listen to some territorial experiences of the OEC country members. They are part, and we embrace all of the countries to participate. We invite them all. Thank you, Violeta, for your experience in Nicaragua. Marlene, for your experience in El Salvador. Unfortunately, William had a connection problem, but Haiti experience is so important. So once again, want to thank you all. This is a protected space, safe space. We want to know each other, want to talk about gender equality, and we'll be sending some emails. We will let you know the name of the expert and what study cases of some countries we'd like to talk about. So thank you very much. Have a really nice day.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Chao.
Gracias.